Hi, welcome to COVID-19 in custody. We are pivoting from our original topic idea where we were going to talk about what different custody factors are in the DMV, what kinds of things that you need to know if you're preparing for a custody battle or a negotiation or trying to figure out what to do if you are splitting from your partner and need to share your children. We will be talking about those, but given the most recent events, we're going to prioritize talking about what happens to those who are sharing custody now in the midst of a pandemic while we are under stay-at-home orders in the DMV. So I'm Christy Zlakis. I'm the owner and founder of Z Family Law. I have been practicing family law for a little over 10 years, all of it in Maryland and more recently the District of Columbia. And we have been working very hard at our firm to stay on top of what's going on with these custody orders, because in some senses, it's about as clear as mud. And with us today, we also have Dr. Elizabeth Dubois and Melissa Kaczynski. And if you guys want to introduce yourselves, why don't we start with Elizabeth?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the divorce coach here in-house at Z Family Law. I've been studying divorce and domestic violence for over a year. 10 years. Woo, the lockdown. So I've been doing this work for about a decade as a researcher during my PhD and my master's degree, and then more recently coming in-house as a private divorce coach with Z Family Law. So I really have a deep background in working with people that are going through divorce, domestic violence, and have aspects of PTSD related to their cases, and get to work with our clients and then clients that come from other law firms who are stuck or feeling challenged, and there's aspects of trauma or PTSD that are at play that are making their cases difficult.
And Melissa, why don't you tell a little bit about you and your firm?
Hi, my name is Melissa Kaczynski. My firm is MK Family Law, and it's based in Washington, D.C. I also have an active Maryland practice, and I'm licensed in Virginia, but my heart remains with all of my international clients. The bulk of my caseload is clients who have multi-jurisdictional issues, which of course happens even within the DMV between Virginia, Maryland, and DC, but also overseas. And I have a strong background in international child abduction, which are some of the most complicated, crazy cases. So I'm looking forward to chatting with both of you today.
All right, so let's get into it. The number one question on everybody's mind. Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Virginia all issued stay-at-home orders this week. Do you still have to follow your custody order? Melissa, what's your answer?
Oh, I would say yes. That's the default answer, the bare baseline answer. Of course, every single family and every single child is a bit unique. And so, I mean, if you have a difficult or complicated circumstance, you always want to talk to your lawyer about whether or not you might fit within some different parameters.
So I want to echo what Melissa is saying. The default baseline is follow your custody order. The Maryland courts in particular have issued guidance saying that, yes, these custody orders are still in effect. Governor Hogan's orders specifically say that you may leave your home to follow a court order. A custody order or a judgment of absolute divorce is an order. That being said, I also want to repeat the lawyer answer of it depends. Yes. There certainly have been emergency situations. It is an emergency out there. There might be issues of immunocompromised family members, of family members being sick, of parents not, getting medical attention for a child, or even child abduction issues that we're all dealing with. And if any of these fits you, or if you think you're not the standard, attorneys are here to help you game it out.
Right. And DC and Virginia's stay-at-home orders are very similar in return. You can facilitate custody pursuant to an order, and I believe Virginia's even says this pursuant to a parenting arrangement. It doesn't necessarily even need to be a court order. But if you have concerns about traversing the metro area, I know your firm has produced a excellent letter that clients can take with them in case they would get stopped for some reason, to explain that they are actually exercising their parenting rights.
Yes. So to explain that a little bit further, what we did is we drafted a letter for all of our clients who have a custody order, and we attached it to their custody order that says, pursuant to, Governor Hogan's executive order, here are the provisions that allow me to travel. Attached, please find custody order. And I attach the custody order and send it to my clients as a courtesy. If that's something that you need or want and you don't have an attorney available, we are doing consultations related to COVID-19 and custody, and that's something that we can produce for you as well and talk with you about how to. I hope nobody's getting stopped when they're exchanging custody. It shouldn't be happening. Unfortunately, it's a different world out there. We've heard some interesting stories about people getting stopped outside of Target, looking at their receipts to see if they were shopping for essential goods. And there was a gentleman who was stopped walking home at 1 a.m. in Prince George's County. So people are getting stopped. It's not the norm, it's the exception, but having your custody order on you as a baseline, I think, is really important. Okay. This one is also for Melissa. Can you and your co-parent agree to something different than what's in your custody order?
Right. So I always think that's good, especially in these particular situations where we're sort of flying by the seat of our pants and different circumstances might be warranted. I think it's important that you do communicate with your co-parent, and if there's temporary arrangements that can be made for whatever reason, maybe there's someone in your household that's sick, so it's not prudent to have the child come back to you, or maybe you are working at home and it's not easy to have the child in your home. You need to be able to communicate that with the other parent, and you need to agree on some temporary interim adjustments that might be warranted.
Some of my clients are doing that right now, and the advice that I'm giving them is take it week by week.
Yeah.
Don't try to plan the next 8 weeks. We don't know how long this is going to last. It could be much shorter. It could be much longer. Likely, unfortunately, it seems to be much longer, but week by week. Every week can be different. You don't know what the child's or children's health status is going to be, education status, if you guys need a break, if your work has something, if all these different things. When you agree on something, the other piece of advice, and this is general advice, is put it in writing.
Yeah.
Ideally, you're going to want to do this via email. Text message is probably not a bad idea, but email is much more clear of we agree to change the schedule for this period for this time. Now, Melissa, do you have any concerns about courts later going, hey, you created a new normal. The child's been with you the whole time?
So right now, I don't. I think that the courts, many judges who are also parents, are realizing that this is a very unique situation that we have never encountered before. And so I think in many ways, they are just happy if parents can reach amicable arrangements themselves without trying to prevail upon the court, especially since the court cannot handle the bulk of emergency matters that may be filed. In the past, it was difficult to get emergency before a court if there was an emergency in a parenting arrangement. I imagine it is 10 times more difficult now with a lot fewer judges. So I think the judges are going to be happy that you worked together because you are co-parenting together. And I'm sure Elizabeth could probably speak more to that.
Mm-hmm.
Co-parenting together is something judges love to see. And I think that would be a good example for your child and a good thing to present to a judge later when you're dealing with this.
You segued perfectly because my next question was for Elizabeth. How do you start that conversation with your co-parent? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a moment where you have to be a bit self-reflective about what has worked well and what has not worked well in the past. If under the best of circumstances, you and your co-parent can't communicate without going down a rabbit hole of screaming at each other, or trotting out past indiscretions, or worse, having communication going between your children. Well, mommy said that you said this or whatnot. This is a moment where, lean on writing, put everything in email. If you have a truly contentious past relationship with your co-parent, getting an attorney involved at this moment is absolutely essential. And a lot of people, I'm a divorce coach, not an attorney, and I have the benefit of getting to talk to a lot of people that don't feel like an attorney can be part of their parenting relationship because of how expensive attorneys can be. And so what I want to say to the families where they're like, an attorney means I have to put down a $5,000, $10,000 retainer, in the situation where you're just communicating with a co-parent that's become really contentious or has always been very contentious. Getting an attorney involved to help you come up with a parenting plan for right now is not a situation where you're asking someone to represent you in court, and that's where you're talking about a big retainer. And so in this moment, if you have a really contentious relationship with your co-parent, tap an attorney. Situations are changing daily now that we have stay-at-home orders. Maybe we'll have some consistency, which is just kind of stay at home. But again, if you have had a really contentious relationship, don't try to DIY this. This is a moment where you're going to need some guidance and need some help. Now, on the other side of that spectrum, if you have a workable communication relationship with your co-parent, oh man, go for it. My co-parent and I are touching base fairly frequently by phone, and he and his partner and I have had a really good working relationship throughout this process, so that between our son and then her two children, the three kids are getting to see each other, they're getting to FaceTime, they're getting to continue those relationships and have the comfort of their blended family, so that even in this moment of like true challenge where children are really experiencing a lot of upheaval, just simply being away from school and out of their routine is a lot. If you can give your children the gift of you and your co-parent smoothly communicating and increasing their ability to feel like they have one household spread across two homes, that's a profound gift to give to your children right now.
So, Elizabeth, a consultation with a lawyer aside, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how lawyers can be helpful during this time. How could you or others as divorce coaches be helpful with setting up these conversations?
Yeah, so some of this comes down to having a good thought partner who can help you go, that's not what this is about. I've had a couple of conversations with clients where we've really just sat down and sorted through the feelings part of this. And divorce coaches aren't therapists, although I do have a background in trauma and PTSD. I want to delineate that mental health practitioners and someone who's helping you think through the emotional components that are making your custody relationship hard are two different things. But what a divorce coach can do for you, or a coach around those legal issues with custody can do for you, is help you really parse out what are the things that you're truly upset about that have to do with your co-parent, and what are the things that you're just upset about. And a lot of times people, whether it's related to COVID-19 or just in general life being complicated, we take one little aspect of a conflict and we lump all the other things that have ever happened before on top of the current situation. And so if you're really struggling to see the forest through the trees, I want you to know that there's opportunities to have impartial thought partners who can help you kind of pull apart the different aspects so that you're just dealing with the one aspect, right? Communication that's become conflictual or struggling to get on the same page. Let's pretend you and your co-parent do have a good workable relationship, but somebody gets sick, right? And you're having to have even more frequent conversation. If you have an impartial thought partner who's trained in some of these aspects, you're going to be able to move forward with a lot less hassle and a lot less emotional just upheaval than if you're trying to go this alone. Or what I'm seeing that's perhaps more concerning is people getting advice on the internet. I'm very active in a lot of the Facebook forums. I'm an admin on a couple of the divorce Facebook forums. And what I'm seeing is people posting specifics about their legal case and getting input from other folks. And I just want to throw the reminder out there. I know Christy and Melissa, you're probably also going, anything that you put on Facebook is admissible in court. All of that can be subject to discovery. And so if you're really struggling and the place that you're going for advice is from friends on the internet, know first and foremost that they're probably not trained to give you accurate information. And there's certainly some privacy concerns that come into play. So if you need help, please reach out to professionals. We're here. A lot of us are doing stuff at low bono rates so that we can be of service. And we want to see you thrive through this. We want to see your kids do well. We want everyone to be as comfortable and safe as possible. And that doesn't just mean safe and healthy. It means safe in what you're putting out on the internet.
So thank you, Elizabeth, because my next question was, how can a lawyer help? And the first thing I want to talk about is, Elizabeth and I are admins on a couple of the same, Facebook page, and I have gotten to the point where I'm copy pasting. Do not put things about your custody case on the internet. Do not put your things about your custody case. Don't do it. Do not put things about your custody case on the internet. It is incredibly damaging and dangerous. And what is also dangerous is when people are seeking advice. I understand money is tight right now. I really, really do. A lot of people have lost their jobs or they're scared. But the fact is, Melissa and I here are giving you general advice so that you have a framework from which to work. But it doesn't mean that your specific case, depending on your jurisdiction, depending on what is in your actual custody order, isn't going to have slightly different information about what you should do. It is one of the reasons why we are, as Dr. Black alluded to, offering COVID-19 co-parenting half-an-hour sessions for $100. Assuming you pass a conflicts check, we will review your custody order, review your circumstances, and go through it with you, and make a plan for what you can and cannot do. And we're doing that at a discounted rate because we understand that families are struggling right now. But do not take your advice from the internet. Be very, very careful. Melissa, is there anything you want to add to that about legal advice and being specific?
Not about that, but you were talking about parenting, coaching, about lawyers. During this time, I think there's also mediators that can help parents communicate. And a lot of mediators who have long time skills in online dispute resolution can also be very helpful. And especially if your parenting agreement also already provides for a mechanism like mediation, where it obligates you to go to mediation to talk about parenting disputes, then you need to seek out a mediator. And I think a mediator is often the next best step, especially since you can't use the courts right now.
And for full disclosure, both Melissa and I are mediators, and both of us do virtual mediation. And I also want to throw out parenting coordinators. If your agreement says that you have a parenting coordinator, use them. Most of them that I know of are able to do virtual sessions, or even if your agreement doesn't say that, there's no reason you can't use a parenting coordinator. Parenting coordinators were trained to help parents communicate and make decisions. That is what we do, and that is all parenting coordination is. So keep that in mind as another offer. But if you are going to talk to an individual attorney, the things that I want you to ask the attorney are as follows. With the stay-at-home order, if I make changes, how should I make them? As far as talk about a mechanism, talk about what kind of writing, things like that. Mm-hmm. If you feel that you have exceptional circumstances, talk them through with an attorney. Does the attorney think in your jurisdiction that those will be found to be exceptional circumstances later by a court if someone were to take you to task for it? If the court would hold you accountable, what remedies are there? Will the other parent get makeup time? Could you be ordered to pay the other side's attorney's fees? Could you be held in contempt? These are some of the things that could happen, maybe yes, no, but that you want to walk through so that when you're making decisions about what to do with your children, especially if you're not in agreement with your co-parent, you know what the potential consequences are. So moving on with our list, we mentioned this very briefly, but Melissa, I'm going to ask you this one. What if your custody exchange is across state lines? For example, parent A lives in the District of Columbia and parent B lives in Pennsylvania. What would you say?
So right now, I still think all three jurisdictions provide for custody exchanges as an exception to be able to leave your house. And like I said, at least for Virginia, I recognize it doesn't even have to be by court order. And so you can do this. You can go across jurisdictional lines in this metro area and facilitate an exchange. Now, it might be more difficult if it's not within this metro area. If perhaps you're going and you have to travel 3 or 4 states away and their stay-at-home orders say something different, where custody exchanges are not even mentioned or not part of the exclusion, or there's some circumstances in the other parent's house. Or you might need to be able to fly or take a train, even if the flights or the trains are going, whether or not that's a safe or good idea. So it gets a little more complicated the further away you have to go.
And the other thing that I want to point out with safety, when we talk about agreeing to do something different, we're not just talking about agreeing to a different schedule. Many of the parenting plans that I have written, the exchange is normally at school, Or at school, if it had been a more high conflict case, the exchange may have been inside of a McDonald's or inside of a, grocery store or something where there were cameras, and you may not want to take that risk right now. So agreeing to access exchanges, maybe going from one car to one car and not going inside a third location, or even a car dropping off at the other parent's house. Be smart, have some common sense about this, and do your best to agree with your co-parent. Okay, Melissa, what if the other parent doesn't take the pandemic seriously? What if they're like, it's just the flu? Like, they can go out and play. They don't need to wash their hands. I'm certainly getting a lot of those calls. I don't know about you, but is that an emergency?
Well, is that an emergency? Again, it probably depends on that specific child and that specific family. For instance, is that child immunocompromised and one household is allowing that child to interact with other children who may have been exposed to the virus? Is a parent in one household actually a healthcare or medical provider where they are exposed to COVID-19 and maybe bringing back into the house? It really is going to depend on that specific circumstance as to, what's happening between households. And if it's inconsistent, that's a problem. It's also a problem because the child's getting different messages in both households. In one household, they're getting the message that it's okay, it's normal, everything's fine, which is, good that they're calm and are thinking through that this is a normal life and I'm not overly stressed. But it's inaccurate, so you need to talk to your co-parent and have consistency even in the message you're sending your child, about washing hands, about not being able to see their friends, about why, it's not because now, I'm going to get arrested under the stay-at-home order. It's because we want you to be healthy. That's why you can't see your friends. So, you need to have a consistent message and you need to have consistent rules. And the problem, of course, becomes when there are those inconsistencies and you cannot communicate to get on the same page. And that's going back to what you were speaking of earlier, Christy, about is there that big of a concern for this particular child and this particular family circumstances, and we can't agree to an adjustment, and does that constitute an emergency? And it's really going to depend. If dad's threatening to get on a plane right now and take an immunocompromised child down to spring break in Florida, maybe that is an emergency. But if it's just that, dad went out to, the Target store the other day and I'm afraid that he may have been exposed and so I don't want to send Johnny over there, that might be different. That might not qualify as an emergency, especially with the very low number of judges and staff that are working in the courthouses trying to field everything that people may think are emergencies. And into their own family, they are. I'm not trying to minimize that, but.
Absolutely. What is an emergency is a very interesting definition. So we certainly are cognizant of that. And this is, again, why you want to seek legal advice so that an attorney can talk through with you what their courts are doing at that moment. Because even if Melissa and I told you right now, hey, that likely would be an emergency in this county, that might not be the case, 2 days from now or 2 weeks from now. So you want to really stay on top of that, and you want to have an attorney who's on top of that in your jurisdiction. This next question is one that I have absolutely seen be found to be an emergency, and I would be surprised if it did not stay an emergency. But Melissa, what's your thoughts on if your child gets sick and your co-parent will not seek medical treatment?
Right. I think in the best of circumstances, that is often an emergency. And I mean, of course, it depends. Is it really just allergies and they're not taking them to get an allergy shot or some nasal spray? Or are they exhibiting a high fever, things that may require medical intervention, and they're not taking that child? And then that goes to a parent's judgment and whether or not they have the judgment to be properly caring for this child on a daily basis. And so I think you need to look at what degree, where on that continuum you may fall, and a good attorney can help you assess to what extent for this particular child and this particular family is that parent's behavior putting the child at risk.
So the next one I'm going to bring up with is if you and your co-parent agree, say one of you is a first responder, or one of you perhaps lives in a situation where you're far enough apart, you don't think exchanging the child's a good idea right now. for health and safety reasons. What about makeup time? Can you guys agree on makeup time later, and will the court enforce that? Melissa, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think you can agree to make up time if the two of you reach an agreement. I think you are absolutely right that something in writing would be appropriate. And I think a court, again, is going to look favorably on two parents who are able to work things out between themselves. And whether or not that's an enforceable contract later on, you know, at least in the jurisdictions where I practice, oral agreements can be enforceable contracts. So if you have things in writing in some email form where it's clear there's a consensus, not just, you know, I want makeup time, but there's no response to that request, where there's a clear consensus between parents, I think that courts are probably going to be flexible in the future, if not by agreement, but, you know, in their own discretion to provide for makeup time.
You know, California, it's just not a jurisdiction that I practice in, but I've been kind of watching what their courts have been doing since they have had their stay-at-home orders for about 2 weeks longer than I have. And I've spoken to a few colleagues out there, and their judges at this point are saying, let me be clear, if you withhold the child, there will be makeup time. It may or may not be equal to the number of days that, you know, of the pandemic, but there will be makeup time. And I think it's interesting because I wonder if, you know, as things progress, if Maryland, DC, and Virginia are going to follow suit and say something similar. I don't know if they will, but it's certainly something that I will be looking for. I'll have makeup time, not in May. So knowing that that's a possibility, I would again encourage people to try to come up with an agreement with their co-parent. Maybe you as a mom or dad are really nervous about exchanging your child now. Maybe you don't want your child out. Maybe you just want your child in one home for safety reasons. Okay, great. Then maybe if you want that so much, you're willing to then give up your summer vacation with your child and let your co-parent have that, or give up some of your summer vacation time. And remember that everything's a trade. And I don't mean everything a trade as in being counting evens. I mean, if you want something, often the other parent does too. And you guys being able to work out amongst yourselves so that your child's best interests are served, but also so that your relationship is maintained, it's going to be really important. In addition to makeup time, something that I wanted to talk about is FaceTime. If you and your parent do agree to not have exchanges right now, or if you're unable to because somebody is sick or somebody lives too far, we are strongly recommending in at least our office, FaceTime. We have spoken to a child psychologist who has said that children under the age of approximately 6, it's a little different. You know, FaceTime can be for them almost as satisfying in a way as physical in-person access. That little kid seeing and, you know, the other parent reading a book to them, or even watching a show. You can do screen share watch parties, or you can watch something with your child. You can read a book to your child, you know, help them with their homework. That's really important right now. And seeing parents do those things is certainly going to be looked at favorably by the courts. Do you have any thoughts on that, Melissa?
Well, I think Elizabeth actually said it best when she was talking about that earlier, you know, even with blended families, other siblings, people who you might not be able to be around, maintaining those consistent relationships and that some semblance of normalcy is actually very good for the child.
Now, Elizabeth, you were the one I was going to talk to you next about this, because you have some really interesting ways of keeping your son entertained while you're working that involve your co-parent, and I think those are helpful. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm really lucky. I have a great co-parent, and his partner also is amazing. And so what my co-parent and I kind of ad hoc worked out, what kind of evolved, is every morning at around 9, when we're on a staff meeting for Z Family Law, my co-parent is hanging out with our son on FaceTime. My son has his own tablet. Haters enjoy, but my son has his own tablet, and he's really become, at the age of 5.5, become adept at reaching out to the people that he wants to spend time with. And so He knows the abbreviations for the names, that he's allowed to FaceTime. I know, Christy, he has FaceTimed you a couple of times. And so he is allowed to initiate calls to his grandmother, to his dad's partner, to his dad's partner's kids. The kids actually figured out how to have a Nerf gun battle on FaceTime. So if your kid has an iPad that can be propped up, know that it will withstand the impact of a Nerf dart. Yeah, so with young kids, my general guidance is let your kids take the lead on this. And also, if ever there was a moment for you and your co-parent to get over your stuff, this is it. And I'll just share anecdotally, my child is very sensitive and really struggling right now. The abrupt change in life on every level has been very, very difficult. And there have been 2 times at night where we have FaceTimed with his dad, and the 3 of us have just talked about, everybody's safe, we're all staying inside. And so for those of you who can stomach a joint family discussion where you and your co-parent are chatting together with your kid, know that can be really reassuring. And then the other thing that I want to say with that, even if you and your co-parent can't be in a space together via, communication, either because you can't stand each other and it's going to devolve into something acrimonious, which is never good for your kids, or because you just don't have the mechanisms through technology, know that the language you use can be really impactful. So instead of, at mommy's house we do this, at daddy's house we do this, it can be really powerful for your kids if they hear a united front. Well, mommy and daddy decided X. Mommy and daddy are all, everyone's washing their hands. Just reassuring your kids that both of their parents are involved in their life. The less you can bifurcate your children's emotional lives, meaning at this house we do this, at this house we do that, technology can help bridge that a bit. And then I just want to give a plug that the more that you encourage your child to define what this time looks like in terms of co-parenting, and not in the sense of they get to call the shots of when the exchange is, but if they want to call dad just cause, don't block that. Give them the space to feel like they have access to your co-parent, whether or not it's the co-parent's time. This is really the moment to let your child feel supported. And if you cannot get over your own garbage because you and your co-parent have had such a contentious relationship, you are the person that needs to seek guidance and help.
So on that, I agree with everything that Dr. Dubois is saying, but I do want to also flag for those listening that sometimes there are co-parents that are not having access right now because there was supervised access and the supervision is not happening now, and all of those things. At least my understanding is instructions from the court is that supervised access, if access is not happening right now because there is a supervisor, that courts are very reluctant to remove the supervisor for access during this time. They might not do that, but that they are very reluctant to do that. So if there is a safety issue, whether it's an emotional safety issue or a physical safety issue, yes, let your child call, but don't abandon those safety protocols if there is supervision of phone calls or things like that. You don't want your kid to be unsafe. But that is the very small minority of cases, thank goodness. So, for the vast majority, absolutely let your kid drive. So this is when I also want to give to Elizabeth first, because you actually did have this happen in your household. What happens if the other parent gets sick?
Oh, Lord help you. So again, I'm very lucky. My co-parent and I have almost 50-50 custody. And so in general, both of us have space in our schedule to really be of service to our clients. And then when we're on either mom mode or dad mode, we're 100% all in, because we do have those moments where our workflow can ebb and flow based on who is in charge of supervising and parenting in the moment. And so my co-parent was quarantined for 14 days, and it was concurrent right as everyone, schools were out, and this is really a real thing. Everybody hunker down. And in those moments, that's when I say, just do your best, man. Like, and really decide what are the things that you're not willing to compromise on. My standards as a parent have really flagged in the past couple of weeks. You know, boundaries around screen time, about bedtime, about, you know, can I have a Snicker bar at 11 a.m.? All of that has really relaxed. But there's a couple of things that I won't negotiate my own values on. And one of them is I won't yell at my child. And the other one is I have to spend at least some quality time, meaning no screens, no phones, no, you know, other person involved, just the two of us hanging out, playing Legos, snuggling, reading a book. So if your co-parent is quarantined and it's just you, 100%, you are a solo act. Decide what's most important to you. Again, for me, it's yelling and quality time. Maybe for you, it's sugar and screen time, whatever it is, right? Get clear on your core values and then let the rest go. Because this is not the time to figure out how to be a mommy blogger and like win Pinterest. This is the time to keep your kids safe to the extent that you can, keep them emotionally stable. And then I want to put in 2 plugs. One, mommy bloggers in Italy are on top of this. They've been doing this self-quarantine now for, I think, more than a month. And they've been putting out really good humorous stuff on just kind of like how to survive 24/7 with your kids in the house. So I want to put in a plug for the mommy bloggers in Italy. And then the other thing is indoor ways to get your wiggles out. So especially for young kids that really need that physical activity so that they don't get crazy. I want to just put in a huge plug. There are Beachbody coaches that are hosting kids' gym classes on Zoom. Those are free, and your kids can see other kids. I personally bought an indoor swing and a trampoline for my kid off Amazon. I think I spent $200 total. So my kid, the first thing he does when he gets up is he races to that trampoline and he's bouncing up and down and he thinks he's having fun. And I know that he's preventing himself from going crazy. So figure out what it is that your kid is going to need. If they're a kid that needs a lot of activity, figure out, you know, how are you getting outside in a way that's safe? If he's a kid that likes to sit like a couch potato, really get clear with yourself on what your core value is. Does it matter to you if he's a couch potato on the screen? And let go of other people's judgments. What other people are doing in their homes as far as homeschooling, screen time, any of that, you know, it's just none of your business what other people think of you. Do what's right for your family, for your kids, and then let the rest go.
Okay, so thank you for that. How do you get on the same page as your co-parent for what to, you know, Melissa mentioned it before, but, you know, Elizabeth, I want you to really hone in on it. How do you, assuming you have a workable relationship with your co-parent, and it's not just totally broken down, how can you get on the same page with your co-parent of what story do we tell our children about the pandemic? I know that there are a lot of really scared little kids right now. They're hearing things on the news, they're overhearing the stress from their parents, and hearing a cohesive story is helpful. So how can you do that?
You know, I think this is unfortunately a place where you just have to have some communication with your co-parent, and it may change day by day a little bit. Again, I'm super lucky. My co-parent and I have had really open communication, not just about the story that we're telling our son, but what each of our individual workloads are and how we can help each other out, right? He's spending that hour in the morning on FaceTime with our kid while I'm on, you know, a staff meeting, whatever it is. But as far as the story goes, it's really getting clear on what your kid needs to hear, right? Like if they are doing fine and plugging along, don't sit them down and have a massive like family meeting about the reality of the world, right? Like again, like follow your kid's lead here. My son is having a very hard time, really, really struggling emotionally. And again, we're doing that kind of joint FaceTime where we're just like, you know, mommy and daddy are both washing our hands, right? Using that unified language. But getting clear on what it is that you want to say, I think is really challenging. And it can only happen if you're able to have a, you know, this is just about little Johnny conversation where you guys talk about like, what is our united front? And I think simple is really key. Don't give more details than your kids are asking for. Definitely don't go into things like body counts. Just, you know, we're all safe inside, we're washing our hands, we're doing everything we can, and point out what your family actually is doing, right? You know, if you're washing your hands and staying at home and getting Instacart instead of going to the grocery store, like, call those things out and say, these are all the activities, because I think one of the things that's most distressing is the feeling of helplessness that a lot of us are having. But especially with kids that have been thrown out of their routine and are really feeling that, make sure that they have access to their friends. Zoom has been really helpful. Now, at least in the District of Columbia, each classroom has a Zoom room set up. That's been very, very helpful. But just being clear with your co-parent about what the story is that you want to tell. And the story that we're telling in my home and in my co-parent's home is just, you know, we're all washing our hands. We're, you know, everybody's being safe. Mommy's healthy, daddy's healthy, you know, partners are healthy, and just keeping it really, really simple. For older kids, if they're asking for a lot more information, you're going to have to make a judgment call about what to share, and then just being really cognizant of what media they are consuming, because that is going to have an impact on the story that you and your co-parent have to share. If they're being exposed to a lot of media that's going into great detail, some of the Facebook pages that are being shared with news that's coming out of New York, if your children are going to be watching that, you're going to have a very different conversation about the story that you tell your kids. So just be cognizant of what the kids are consuming. And that's not me saying limit screen time or anything like that. It's just, you know, as you're compiling what information you'd like to share with your kids, the unified story you and your co-parent want to have, just be cognizant of what is it that you need to answer questions about.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the conversation to the issue of contempt, which is what a lot of people are very afraid of. For those of you who don't know, contempt of a court order means that you are willfully not following the court order when you have the ability to do so. I have had clients call me very concerned of, if I don't follow the court order and my co-parent and I cannot agree, and I make the decision that it is in the best interest of my children for them to stay with me and not go with my co-parent, what can happen to me? Now, again, I'm going to give a big disclaimer. It depends. And that's, you know, every case is individual. And that's why we say talk to attorneys. And also things change. Things are changing day by day. I gave different advice 2 weeks ago than I would give today, because the circumstances have changed and the court's guidance have changed. So your first line of defense is an attorney, but for an overarching framework, Melissa, what options when this ends, because nobody's really going for contempt in the middle of the pandemic, but if you decide to withhold your children and it's because the other side, you know, maybe doesn't wash your hands enough for your liking, or something that perhaps isn't an emergency, what could happen?
Right. Well, a variety of things can happen. And of course, you first talk to a lawyer and you start writing down a list of why it is that you're going to withhold access to the other parent, because you're going to need to discuss those very specific circumstances and how they relate to your specific child with this lawyer. And then if you still decide to withhold access, you need to be prepared that the lawyer may suggest that you file a motion simultaneous with withholding the access, maybe a temporary motion or a motion for temporary modification of the access schedule. Even if it's not going to get heard on an emergency basis, you might want to put paperwork into the court file to explain the reasons behind it. But then, of course, eventually any decision, either your motion to temporarily modify or the other parent's motion to hold you in contempt for violating the court order, will get resolved by a court. And the court can do a variety of things. And a lot of it's going to be based on your underlying reasons that you discussed with your attorney and that you used as the basis to withhold access. They could do anything from makeup time all the way down to, if they disagree with what you are, your reasons, your underlying reasons for withholding access, they could implement some type of change in the custodial schedule or decision making if they feel you aren't acting with good judgment. And so it could vary, and it could vary in the dramatic sense that it depends on the circumstances. So you want to be cognizant that this could have a more long-term impact on your custodial arrangement if you decide to withhold the access.
are there any circumstances as of today? And as of today, is, for anybody who's going to listen to this later, because we are going to put this up on our website. So today is April 2nd. As of today, are there any circumstances that you can think of where perhaps taking the chance of being found in contempt would be a good idea?
I mean, it's hard to say specific circumstances, but I would think if the child is in immediate danger, by sending that child to the other parent's house. So if you're doing something to address the child's immediate safety, and if you don't take this step, then the child would be irreparably harmed, damaged, or possibly, sick, or, significantly sick, or possibly even, I hate to say it, but dead. That probably would meet the grounds, but it depends on what the underlying reasons are for that specific child and that specific family as to whether they really meet that threshold.
It's tough because, a couple of weeks ago, certain judges were saying that the pandemic itself was dangerous enough. And now the guidance from the court is absolutely not that. The guidance from the court is and this is going to be something that I'm going to, be looking at with my clients as I advise them. If you go to the grocery store at any point during this pandemic, if someone can pull your credit card statements or your bank statements and you're going to the grocery store or you're going to get gasoline or anything like that, and you didn't exchange your child and there aren't additional circumstances of immunocompromisation or anything else, well, how can you look a judge in the eye and say, hey, it was okay for me to go to the grocery store and expose my child, but it wasn't okay for my co-parent to have their constitutional right to co-parent our child. And it wasn't okay for our child to have their right to see their other parent. And that's where it's tough. And that's where it's changing, all the time. But overall, courts seem to be getting on the same page, especially around here, of you got to let that time happen. Mm-hmm. Not that there aren't extreme circumstances. I've also seen out of the courts, local courts, a child with 104-degree temperature where one parent wasn't getting medical treatment. Absolutely, that was considered an emergency. Parents trying to travel with children, that has been considered an emergency, and not taking it seriously and trying to travel with the children. So, it's very much a situation where we're all learning as we go. Okay, so Melissa, what if you legitimately need an emergency order? As of today, April 2nd, is it possible to get one?
So all the courts in the metro area, in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, are open for emergencies, but there are different processes per courthouse. So for instance, in DC, there are processes where you can electronically file an emergency and you have to send it to special email addresses and mark it in a certain way. Same Montgomery County, Maryland Circuit Court just issued an order just today about how you have to designate it as an emergency. And you have to realize that in most of these courthouses, the clerks are not working or only have one clerk working at a time to process all the paperwork. And normally what happens is the clerk has to process the paperwork before it even gets sent to a judge. And there are so few judges that, you can't guarantee, like we had in the past, that an emergency will get heard the same day that it's actually being filed. And then even then, I would imagine that the judges, whatever the duty judges, the emergency judge, or if the judge assigned to your case in DC is working on the case, they would probably look and determine just on the paperwork itself whether it is an emergency before they would even determine whether people are allowed into the locked courthouse to argue their case. So you need to be very careful and talk to a lawyer and be able to put together a well-crafted argument and plan that it's not going to be instantaneous, at least not as instantaneous as it used to be, where you could get something resolved on the same day.
So moving aside from the emergencies and contempts, I want to talk about custody mediation during a pandemic. What can mediators or parenting coordinators or any of the alternative dispute resolution professionals do to help you? Like, we talked about how lawyers can help. We talked about how divorces coaches can help. And I completely accidentally skipped over that. How can mediators and parenting coordinators help you in this? I'll let you go. Sorry, Melissa, before I go ahead talk.
That's okay. Well, I mean, I've been doing online dispute resolution or mediation for a long time. And I think that, the best person to do this is someone who has an understanding of technology, understands security and privacy issues, because not all technology is going to be secure and private. So they need to have an appreciation of that as well. But they also need to be a skilled dispute resolution professional, someone who has training and experience and be able to communicate with people, not just in person, but also over these type of platforms. Technology itself can be used in a variety of ways. It doesn't necessarily mean that the mediator has to interface with you on a video. It could be phone, it could be electronic mail, it could be online platforms like Our Family Wizard, or there is another app called Co-Parenter, which is like real-time snap parent coordination on an app. It's it's a whole new world out there where you can use this technology to help some intermediary try to bridge communication gaps. It doesn't require everyone being on the same platform at the same time. And so in that way, it really actually may be better for those who may be feeling that there's some power imbalance, that maybe they don't feel comfortable having a conversation with the other person. This intermediary can actually be a good conduit to help you feel more comfortable and to help reframe information going parent to parent, to help analyze the situation and say, you really are on the same page, but you're not verbalizing it in the same way. Maybe I, as the mediator or professional, can help you realize you're on the same page and help you reach some interesting and creative solutions for this interim period of time.
And some of the things that we can help you with as dispute resolution professionals, in addition to figuring out the custodial time, we can help you get on the same page about what story you're telling your children. We can help you get on the same page about coordinating your children's distance learning, figuring out a plan for that, figuring out a plan for makeup time if that's a thing you're going to do, and making a plan even for legal custody decisions, such as when you're going to take the child to the doctor, what symptoms are going to trigger you to do that, which doctor are you going to? Are you going to the pediatrician, or are you going straight for the emergency room? People have very different ideas of what the right answer is these days, and getting on the same page about that, ideally before you're in an emergency situation, is going to be your best bet. Okay, so at this point, we are going to take questions about custody in the pandemic, custody and COVID-19. We want to do that because, again, we did pivot this webinar so that we would be talking about those issues. So I want to stop and answer questions about that before we go into how can you talk about custody generally. So we do have two questions already up here. So I'm going to let either of you answer this one. So question number one, how do you handle a situation where the child may be asking for more time with the non-custodial parent, but you're concerned about the extra potential negative influence that parent will have on the child with extra time?
Who wants to take that one?
Melissa, you go first.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on why the child's asking for additional time. I represent a lot of children, and I do like to listen to the child's voice and respect what they say, but there are a whole lot of very complicated reasons underpinning why they may be asking for whatever they're asking for. And so I think that would be the first question that would come to my mind. But if the child seems genuine, and perhaps it's because they have a genuine, anxiousness about not seeing the other parent, is the other parent okay because I can't see them? Maybe there are other ways to address it as well. So if you have that underlying answer to why they're asking, you might be able to address their concerns in a variety of different ways. And in general, perhaps adjusting the schedule on this temporary interim basis might not have the same impact, but you might want to get on the same page with the other parent before that additional access might start happening.
Sorry.
I also, in addition to kind of sussing out like where the request is coming as far as your child, right? Are they wanting to spend more time with the non-custodial parent because the non-custodial parent will let them avoid the distance learning, right? You've decided, hey, I'm going to take it seriously that you're distance learning, and the other parent is like, screw it, I could care less, just please don't bother me while I'm working. No, really, like, use your judgment there, right? And if you've been granted sole physical custody because you're the person making better judgment calls about the child's best interest, take that seriously, right? A court has already possibly said, like, you're the person that's going to make wise choices here. So be reflective about what it is that your kid is asking, but also, really investigate your own concerns, because if your concern about negative influence is that they're going to have more screen time, sit with yourself and decide if that's a battle worth having. If your concern is that the parent is smoking marijuana in the house in front of your 7-year-old, yeah, I mean, use your best judgment there, right? The other thing that I'll just say, and this gets said in our office a lot to clients, is it's not your job to be your kid's friend, right? It's your job to be their parent. And I joke with my son often, he'll ask for something that he knows he's not allowed to have. And I say, is mommy going to say yes? He goes, no. And, if he gets real bummed about it, I say, it's because I'm a mean mommy. And he laughs and he goes, no, you're not. But it's not my job to be my 5-year-old's best friend. And so if your kid is really bent out of shape because you're holding a boundary and they've decided, screw you, I want to go be with my other parent, it's fine. Like, it's totally fine. There's plenty of great, memes out on the internet about holding your boundaries, and you're not there to be your kid's mom, your kid's best friend. You're there to be their parent. You're there to instill in them a set of values and the ability to moderate their own emotions, because the truth is, at some point, this will be over. Life will get back to some semblance of a new normal, and how your kids get through this is really going to help them set the tone for whether or not they feel like they have stability and good grounding with you. And so if your goal is to make this time super extra fun, that may not be the most important thing versus providing stability, consistency, and to the best of your ability, emotional reassurance.
I agree with both what Melissa and Elizabeth said, but I do want to echo one specific part, and that is, what kind of potential negative influence are we talking about?
Yeah.
Some people are not the primary custodial parent because the other parent has a very busy job, but where they travel a lot, but were it not for that job, there is no negative influence. So if your concern is, screen time or something like that, maybe relax a little bit about that. But if there were reasons why a custody schedule is so imbalanced that there is a non-custodial parent, then again, consider what those reasons are and whether or not your child is not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. And again, while I feel like I'm a huge plug for lawyers here, talk about it with a lawyer if you're not sure. Talk it through. We're going to be able to give you a good idea of what a court's going to say. We can't be perfect, but we certainly have a much more broad base of experience with these judges and with these courts. And knowing more about your situation, we can give better advice. Okay. What can I do during this time when the other parent is not willing to work with the other parent? So I assume the other parent is not willing to work with with you. That is one of the toughest situations, and I've talked to a lot of different parents with that right now, that they're just not able to. Get a lawyer involved, whether it's a mediator or a non-lawyer mediator, but get a mediator involved, a parenting coordinator, or get your lawyer involved. If you don't have one, now's a good time to check out websites, check out, people who are being active online and find one. Sometimes a letter or an email, usually an email at this point, from someone with Esquire after their name. I hate to say it, but it makes people sit up and listen, and hopefully get them talking to you. But if you need that help, then we're here for you. I do want to say one thing about finding a lawyer right now. And I don't mean this to disparage any of my colleagues, because I think I have a lot of really wonderful colleagues. But I want to echo what Melissa said. Look for a law firm or an attorney that is comfortable with this online technology. If you see a law firm and you go to their website and it says something like, due to coronavirus, we are temporarily suspending time, or we have intermittent access to our emails, or we have, then that's a sign to me that they're not comfortable with technology. It should be fairly seamless from going from home to, from working at an office to working from home if it's something that they're comfortable with. And those are the firms that are going to be able to keep up and keep at a good pace. And we have some great colleagues that are now learning how to use these platforms, but you may not want to be their test subject.
Yeah, and I would say also look for the attorneys, rather than doing a straight up Google search, look for the attorneys that are being super active on LinkedIn and Facebook, because those are the attorneys that are in these chat rooms and in these forums and really monitoring what's going on, what are people's concerns. And I can speak for our firm with a lot of confidence and speculate a bit just because I know what our colleagues are doing as well in other firms. We're really on top of the news. And I don't mean that to be like, we're watching what's going on. Like we're actively monitoring what's going on in Supreme Courts in Michigan and Texas and California so that we can be able to give guidance to our clients, even as the Maryland Court of Appeals has not yet made a ruling. We're staying on top of all of this, not because we're super invested in watching the news 24/7, but because we want to be able to give you accurate information, and it's constantly changing. And so if you do need an attorney, and again, I just want to like asterisk that, you're not looking at a $5,000 or $10,000 retainer to go have a consultation. Like, don't be afraid of the price tag when we're like, you need an attorney. Don't think that that means you have to go cash out what's left of your 401k. We're talking, go spend $100, $200 to have a consultation and get some guidance about what's going on. But definitely be looking at social media for the folks that are staying on top of this, because what I don't want for you is to go do a Google search, find somebody on their website, have a Zoom consultation with them, and they have not been doing their homework and watching what other courts are doing across the country and how this is evolving. So even if maybe they know how to use Zoom, but if they're not watching what's going on a day-to-day and even kind of like hour-by-hour basis, they may not be able to give you great advice. That doesn't mean they're not good attorneys. It just means they're not really taking this need for constant adaptation seriously.
Or they're not able to. I mean,
right. Yeah. I mean, they're not that
they might be taking it seriously, but they might not have that capacity right now. Okay. So next question: without good reason, just out of rage that court is being pursued. I'm not sure I understand that question. If whoever typed that could type that again, or give us some assistance of what you mean. I'm not sure how to answer that, what that means. Okay. Do either of you have any idea? Oh, okay. I sounded late. What did you state about COVID-19 shutdown and the custody exchange? We said that you need to be exchanging custody right now with exceptions. There are exceptions to every single rule, and there are places where you can't. But unless you and your co-parent can agree, you need to be exchanging your children. Any other questions that anybody would like to type to us, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can call on you.
I want to try to kick on this without good reason, just out of rage court is being pursued, because I think I know where that's coming from. It's not going to fly, right? In general, if someone is trying to abuse the court as a mechanism to get back at a parent just out of spite, Melissa, Christy, do you guys think a court is going to hear something where it's on its face just being used to get back at a co-parent?
Oh, they'll hear it. It won't necessarily go anywhere, but they'll hear it. When it involves children, the courts want to make sure kids are okay. But as far as it going anywhere and being successful, that's a different story. And that really depends on why. Okay, seeing no hands raised and seeing no additional questions, we're now going to switch topics of, okay, so you're sitting here in lockdown, for lack of a better word. You're staying at home, you're practicing social distancing, and you look on the other side of the couch and go, maybe it's time we end this and we need to figure out what to do with our kids. let's talk about that, because there, unfortunately, with COVID-19 and with other circumstances that have happened before where people are spending a lot of time at home, divorce, separation is something that really does happen. There are a lot of articles happening right now out of China about how a lot of the lockdown things were lifted, the rules were lifted, and immediately people were filing for divorce. And I don't know that that's going to happen here, but I can only tell you from the calls that we have been getting, enough people are at least thinking about it. So if you're sitting there at home and you're thinking about it and you're wondering if this is time, we want to go over with you what that could look like. The first thing that I want to say is about dispute resolution processes. I say it with divorce, but I also want to echo it with custody. There are as many ways for you to determine how to share your children's time or how your children should spend their time, as there are figuring out sometimes you can have great children. That sounds really trite, but you got to know that there are different processes out there. Litigation is not the only one. So the first one that everybody knows about is litigation. Litigation is where you file a complaint, the other side files an answer. It might be called a petition and a response. You go through a process where you exchange information, that's called discovery, and you ultimately get to court and a judge makes a decision. This is the one that everybody knows about, but it is certainly not the only one, and it is often, especially when it comes to children, not the best one. Other options include the collaborative process. This does involve attorneys and often can involve a child expert who can help you sit down and, in an open forum, sitting down, make a good decision about what should happen with your children's time. Another one is mediation. That involves a mediator, a trained mediator, usually an attorney, but not always. And mediation can involve attorneys for each parent or no attorneys for each parent, sitting down, working out a parenting plan to figure out how your children's time is going to be shared. Another option is attorney to attorney negotiation. This is where each parent has an attorney, and those attorneys negotiate on behalf of their clients for how a child's time is going to be shared. And there's also the old sit around the kitchen table and work it out ourselves. Ideally, if you're going to do that, you're going to have an attorney look it over and at least write it for you, so that it can be written in a way that will be accepted by the court. And in addition to being written in a way that will be accepted by the court, we can also remind you of things that you may not have thought of. But those are the primary ones that are coming to the top of mind. Melissa, do you have any other ones that you can think of that are pretty mainstream?
Those are the most mainstream ones. I think in the future we'll see arbitration also coming to light, where parties agree to employ the help of a neutral arbitrator, usually a retired judge or a very seasoned family lawyer, to actually make binding decisions on certain issues in their family law case. That's not as prominent in the metro area here, but it is becoming more of a reality in a lot of jurisdictions across the country.
So in figuring out a schedule for children, one of the big buzzwords that everybody always hears is the best interests of the child. I have a love-hate relationship with these words because I love the fact that they mean that we're putting the children first. I hate it because people use that label to excuse all kinds of terrible behavior. So Melissa, can you give us a general definition? Because I know each jurisdiction is slightly different, but a general definition of what is best interest of the child?
Right. In the 3 jurisdictions around the DMV, it really is just whatever specific to this child, but each court has very clear delineated factors that the judge must look at when trying to determine that. And it ranges from anything from the child's education and medical care and how both parents are involved in that, the other siblings and relatives who are important to this child, how close the parents live to one another, their jobs and their employment and how demanding it is, what the child's age and maturity is and what their opinion of things are. All of those and a variety of other things can always come into play into what really is best for this specific child. judges may need to look at every single one of those factors, but of course, the outcome for every single one of those factors is going to be different depending on the child and the family.
Are mothers given preferential treatment?
Are who mothers?
Mm-hmm.
Under the law, no, absolutely not.
And if you have always been the primary custodian of your children, are you given special treatment?
I mean, the judges, as part of their analysis of factors, will look at the role each parent have played in a child's life. But when you're an intact family, the dynamics are much different than when you are now in separate households. You know, you might take on certain roles when you're in one house, about who does, you know, bedtime and baths and dinner and things like that based on what your out of home work schedules are. And that's just going to be dramatically different when you're living in separate households. So while primary custodian, when an intact family, it's going to look different later. And so a judge will factor that in, very specific to the family.
And I want to add to what Melissa's saying. First of all, I agree with everything she's saying, but to give a concrete example, this is a very generic one. I'm not trying to be, you know, gender specific other than for purposes of providing an example. Mom has been a stay-at-home mom. Dad has been in the workforce. Mom has clearly been the primary custodian since she was the stay-at-home mom. She's changed all the diapers. She's done all those things. Well, now we're going to separate. Now, mom also will have a responsibility, more than likely, again, there's always the outliers, but to provide some kind of income for the children. So mom is now going to be working. Dad might want to pull back some of his hours and spend more time with his children. Perhaps when he was married to mom, he was more than happy to, you know, delegate things like going to the doctor, taking the children to the doctor, taking the children to their parent-teacher conferences and stuff like that to mom, because they could talk about it at the dinner table, or they could talk about it later that night together. Well, now that you're not at the same dinner table and you're not having that time, you know, after the kids go to bed to sit there and talk about the doctor's appointment or the parent-teacher conference, dad might want to go. And courts do consider that. And I have a lot of parents who were the stay-at-home parent, whether it was a mom or a dad, get very frustrated, but he never or she never. Well, now it's different. Now you're not a team in the same way. You're still a team in that you're co-parents, but you're not a partnership for yourselves. And then courts really do recognize that parents now want to shift their roles a little bit so that they can be more involved, and not just be more involved, so that they can be involved sometimes at the same level as they were and have the same kind of access to information. So Melissa, what is the difference between legal custody and physical custody?
Sure. A legal custody is what major decisions need to be made for the child and how those are made. Is it made by one parent? Is it made by both parents? And the major decisions tend to revolve around three primary spheres: the child's religious upbringing, their medical treatment and health, and then their educational upbringing. Physical custody or residential custody, whatever your jurisdiction may call it, or parenting time, access, visitation, all of it really is just the schedule the child is. Where's that child sleeping? What parent has authority over that child, so that if a school calls and says, Johnny is sick, what parent are they calling? Whose time is it, so that that parent can go and pick up Johnny from school? So it really is those two dimensions that make up that overall arching well-being of the child.
So Elizabeth, and thank you for that, Melissa, but so Elizabeth, say you have been that primary stay-at-home parent.
Yep.
You're facing you have to share those. How do you emotionally prepare yourself to share your child? You've always shared your child, but now,
right, it's going to be a different thing.
And your child's not under the same roof. How do you emotionally prepare yourself for that? Because that's tough.
It's a lot, yeah. So I think having a support team is really important. This is a moment to circle the wagons as far as your mental health. You have to get a therapist. And good news right now, all the therapists are trying to figure out how to do telesessions. So big plug for Headspace. This is not an endorsement. They're just happen to be ahead of most of the game. Headspace is a great place to go for therapy. Look into getting a divorce coach who can help you sort through this, but know that this is your stuff, right? And the less that you can put on your kid about your anxiety of I'm only going to be their mom half the time. You know, your kids don't need to carry that weight. That's work that you need to be doing. Ministers can play a really important role here in helping you suss out, like, what is your value to the child beyond the actual, like, you're wiping their nose or tucking them in every night. Know that those bonds don't break easily. Even if you're having a full 50-50, or, you know, kids with you during the school year and then with dad, you know, during the summer and holidays, things like that. You know, your kids are emotionally bonded to you for bigger reasons than who helps them get out of the bathtub at night. I'm getting, during this lovely lockdown time, the chance to read some you know, page turners of studies. So if you are going to go Google the internet on children and divorce, know, like, wear a hazmat suit in there. There's a lot of studies that claim causation rather than correlation about children and mental health and how they do well. What I want to say as a person with a PhD and a lot of years of doing social science research, I can stand behind research that says, like, there is a greater likelihood that children coming out of high contention homes are going to have mental health challenges. So to the extent that you can, put on a good face with your co-parent, and that may not mean that you and your co-parent are on FaceTime saying everything's fine, right? You can have distance, emotional and social distance, but still say, you know, I respect daddy, right? You know, or I care about daddy as a person, and I'll always care for him because he loves you, right? And so being very clear with your child that they are not under siege for caring about your co-parent. There's a great book that I'm reading right now called The Treehouse War. It's a young adult novel, but if you're in the process of thinking about separating from your spouse, go pick it up. It does a great job of going through some of the feelings that kids experience, especially the kind of tween years. And, you know, more than anything, just remember your kid is not a candy bar, right? Nobody wins if they get exactly equal half. This is not about who gets more time or who's a better parent. This is about, how does your child have a quality relationship with each household? So if you're counting time, if you're really like, it has to be even, or you're, frankly, in my opinion, worse, thinking about how many nights you need to have in order to have a particular calculation of child support, like, knock it off. Get some therapy, get some help, and recognize that your children are going to be directly impacted emotionally by the way that you conduct yourself right now. So if you act it from a place of integrity, and my only goal is that my child has a healthy and sane relationship with me, healthy and sane relationship with their other parent, you're going to do just fine. If your goal is to have exactly the right amount of days, like, get over yourself, get some help, because that's not what this is about. And I understand that people can get extremely contentious for lots of good reasons, but your child is going to do better the more you can keep your head screwed on straight and have a very clear vision of what it is that you're trying to achieve. What you're trying to achieve is not having a particular percentage of time. What you are trying to achieve is to demonstrate to your child that you're a person that can put their needs and emotional well-being and safety ahead of your own petty differences with their co-parent. Or if it's a safety issue, that you can really keep in mind the fact that even if, you know, your spouse has been abusive to you, you're being very thoughtful and pulling in folks like child therapists, child psychologists, parent coordinators to help you think about how that child can process what they're witnessing. Really be cognizant of where your own emotional well-being is clouding your judgment about what your children need.
Thank you. So Melissa, if I already have a court order and I'm in the DMV and I want to change it, what do I need? What the magic words here? What's a material change in circumstances?
Sure. So those are the buzzwords. It's a legal standard. In order to have a court modify your existing custody order, you need to prove that something significant has changed in the circumstances of your child or the parents. And it varies, I have to say, by judge as to what constitutes that material change. Some judges have a very low bandwidth where, you know, it could just be that the child has a different preference, or, you know, it's typically not just the child's getting older, But, some judges will entertain that. But for the most part, material has to be significant. So a parent needs to relocate because of a job, or the child now has a significant health issue, or a parent has a significant health issue or educational component that has changed since the last custody order was issued. All of that becomes relevant to go back in. Now, of course, you don't need a material change in circumstance to reach a further agreement to modify your existing custody arrangement. You can always go back and modify it by agreement with your co-parent and then incorporate it into a new document, a new parenting agreement.
Okay, and this is the last question for all panelists before we open it up to questions from the participants. And we're all going to answer this. So we're all under stay-at-home orders, and we want to use this time to our advantage. Some of us are going to clean out our closets. Some of us are going to clean out our spice cabinets. But while you have all this time on your hands, how can you prepare and get ready for a child custody negotiation or litigation battle? Like, what can we do to get ourselves ahead? Do you want to start with that one?
Me?
Melissa, you can start with that. Sure.
Okay. I heard both of you say that there are a lot of unreliable resources on the internet, but I would suggest a reliable resource is AFCC, the Association for Family and Conciliation Courts, which can be found at afccnet.org, afccnet.org. They actually have a resource for parents, including several guides that were crafted by courts throughout the United States, by mental health professionals who really give you insight into what is a developmentally appropriate schedule for children of different ages, so that you can start researching, what is out there and what are different options. Because mediating a lot of these cases, I see that parents haven't even understood what is within the realm of possibilities for organizing their child's time and the parenting going forward. So just gathering that information from a reliable source. And AFCC's website also has some COVID-19 resources, such as links to Massachusetts General Hospital or UNICEF, places where you can go to learn what you should say and how you should frame it to your children to talk about the pandemic.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that about finding good resources. If you're at home and you're realizing, this is the moment where my marriage has, there was conflict, but it's very clear now after being home together for 3 weeks that what we're doing in our marriage is not what we want our kids to replicate, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I need to stay together for my kids. If you're at home right now for 3 weeks, and you're finding that what you're modeling for your children is that marriage means you scream at each other all day, I want you to do some inner work right now. So if you're at home struggling and kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to have to go through a custody battle if I get divorced and therefore I shouldn't get divorced, I want you to kind of pull a wider lens right now and use this time to think really critically about what it is that you want your kids to think marriage means. I have a couple of my clients writing letters to their children 10 years in the future about what they hope they took away from watching their parents in a marriage. Digest some hard truths about yourself right now. So as much as getting together good resources and gathering information like who makes what as far as income, those are pragmatic details that an attorney is going to need. So sure, gather up bank account statements, have a good idea of who took, little Johnny to the pediatrician when, that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's pragmatic, but right now you've got plenty of time on your hands. And we don't know how long it lasts, right? And so really do some critical reflection. Journaling is a powerful tool, but also get yourself to a mental health practitioner, because whether you are going to go through a contentious custody battle, and hopefully you won't, or things are going to be pretty easy, you guys are going to sit down at the kitchen table and sort it out amongst yourselves, you have good communication, but just a rough marriage, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, it's going to be hard and it's going to be a change. And even families that have really relatively low conflict splits, it's a massive upheaval for your kids, which is not to say don't do it. It's to say make sure that you have some support in place. And right now you have the wealth of resources that the internet provide, and a lot of therapists and practitioners in this space are going online and creating opportunities for people to connect with them, even in evening and weekend hours. So there's help out there. Tap it, and just take care of yourselves mentally, because that's going to translate to your kids doing well.
Thank you. So I'm going to also piggyback a little bit, because then I'm going to get into the practical, because, well, lawyer, I'm very practical on these things. But this is something I tell every single one of my child custody clients, whether they're coming in child custody, they were married or not married to the other side, whether it's a modification or whether it's an initial custody case. And that is, I want you to look 5 years down the road and tell me what your relationship with your co-parent looks like. Okay, now what does it look like 10 years down the road? And that's true whether you have an 8-year-old or an 18-year-old, because at some point you're going to be sitting near with, in same general locale as your co-parent at graduations, at weddings, at births of grandchildren. And do you want to be the kinds of parents that are able to take a picture together with your child or not? You might not be. Do you want to be able to discuss things like, hey, I'm going to take, little Johnny to his first, dorm room in college, and you're going to be the one who takes him home. Can we work that out? You have a long road ahead of you. And if you don't really look and think and be contemplative about what you want that relationship to look like then, not now, you're not going to take the good steps to get there and to maintain that vision of what you want it to look like as you're going through now. Because now is when you're going to be scared, frustrated, angry, going through the roller coaster emotions of figuring out what the schedule is going to be. So keep that in mind. For practical things, now is the time to start gathering information. So writing down, even so that your attorney can have it. Where does your child go to school? What grade are they in? What extracurricular activities have they historically done, so that any kind of things that have been done can be maintained? Where does the child go for pediatrician? Where do they go for their pediatric dentist? Does the child have any special needs? And I don't mean necessarily just a special needs child. Their special need is that they are an amazing pianist, and they need piano lessons because they're going to, be the next, I don't even know what, but that's their thing. We have one client that their child was an amazing figure skater. That was something that they needed to do. So if your child has any special needs, like those kinds of needs, that needs to be written down as well. What kind of home do you need in order to be able to house these children? So for example, if you have one child, maybe you just need a 2-bedroom apartment, at least as a temporary thing. If you have 5 children, what kind of home do you need, and how much will that cost? And how can that cost be covered? So start looking at and doing that practical research. So the practical research involves figuring out what the schools and all of those things are, so you can try to stay in the same location if at all possible. Start looking then at what kind of home you need, how much it costs, creating a budget that includes the housing, that includes the special needs, that includes the extracurriculars, that includes all of those things. Start thinking about and looking into things like, do you and your spouse want to agree to pay for college? Do you not agree to pay for that? Do you want to pay for any specific, again, super special extracurricular activities, or do you want to pay for private schools? That's something that your family has historically done. Start thinking about these things and writing them down. Another super practical thing is, if you and your co-parent are in such a place that you can talk about, when the kids are in bed, not in front of them, never, never, never in front of them. But if they're in bed and it's relatively amicable, maybe start talking about what a schedule might look like. I've seen a lot of parents come up with their own custody schedules just by talking it out about what might be good. Start thinking about what kind of consistency needs to happen in both homes, whether or not that's something you need or don't need. Do you want to have consistency across the board of when the kid goes to bed? Do you want to have consistency across the board of what age the child's going to be allowed to drive, or when the child's going to be allowed to date or have a cell phone? The more that you and your co-parent can get on the same page, and of course, I also want to point out, if you can get a consultation with an attorney, you know, if your co-parent isn't going to overhear you, or you're able to do that, they can give you more specific advice to your case about what documents specifically you need to be gathering they need from you. And that can certainly be something that you can spend some time doing while you have this time on your hands. Okay, so we do have one question. I'm going to read it, but then I'm going to suggest to this person that that you set up a consultation, whether it's with me, Melissa, or another attorney. It's a very specific question that I have a lot more questions about it before I could answer it. But when mom and dad split up when the child was 4 months old, mom took a while to get settled into work, new location, and the father had nanny service to assist with childcare more than the mother. Does that work against the mother, especially if it took up to 6 month duration? That's when I have a whole bunch more questions before I would be able to answer that. Melissa, I see you nodding as well. And I'm sorry, I'm happy to answer general questions, but there's a lot more to explore there. So I would encourage you, listener, to have a consultation, to have an initial consultation with an attorney, and go into more detail about your specific case. Are there any other general questions about custody orders, or preparing for a custody battle or negotiation, or even discussion with your spouse or your partner if you're not married? They give it a second. You can either raise your hand, or you can type something in the question and answer or in the chat. I can see all three of those things. I always feel like we should play the Jeopardy music, but I always give it a minute because you never know when people are typing. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions, so I just want to thank everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. Melissa, if anybody wants to find you, how do they find you?
My law firm's website is mkfamilylawfirm.com. Thank you.
And if you want to find Dr. Dubois or me, go to www.zfamilylaw.com. We have on there all of our COVID-19 resources, including a planning tool for parents who are struggling to figure out how to make that plan with their co-parent. If that's something that you want and you can't find easily, you can always shoot us an email at hello@zfamilylaw.com, and we'll be happy to send that to you. If you are interested in that $100 half an hour COVID-19 in custody consultation, very brief consultation, you can also schedule that right on our website, again, www.zfamilylaw.com. Thank you for stopping by. We hope you got value out of this, and if you want to listen to the recording later, it'll also be on our website, and we'll send a copy over to Melissa, and she can put it wherever anybody can find her as well. Thank you.
Be well.